Alright, welcome back. This is the video on the strings portion of this section. So we're going to be discussing a very important data type called strings. But before we get into that, I should mention one thing. What is an object? So the title of this section is data types and objects. So we discuss what data type is. An object is basically and everything in Python is an object. So an object has attributes, it has things you can do to it, it has things which define it, and everything in Python is an object. So let's take a look at the print statement. So what the print statement we're familiar with, it takes in a string and it prints it out to the console. So if I were to type in just print and press enter, it tells me that print is a function named print. And what's important to note here is that it didn't throw an error. What would throw an error is if I typed in error. Error is not a Python specific a function or an object that's defined in Python already. So it tells me you have not defined error. What is error? So this is what I mean. So this will help you differentiate between why we use quote marks around strings. Basically, a string is a non-Python specific keyword like print is, but you can use it but it basically turns those words into its own data type that you can perform other operations on. So for example, error, now this will not throw an error. This tells me that error is a string. There was no error because we don't need to define strings. Whenever we use quote marks around a word, that automatically gets defined as a string object. So there's a bunch of different things you can do with strings, but before that you should know a bunch of different ways to define strings. So you've been seeing me use double quotes to define strings. You can also use single quotes, so there's no problem there. You can also use triple quotes, so 1 2 3 and 1 2 3. Jupyter Notebook auto completes the remaining 3, and what this allows you to do is have a multi-line string. So if I want, I can have a multi-line string, multi-line string. Okay, I'm gonna store these in variables. So var1 double quote, I'm gonna double quote string is equal to this, single quote string is equal to this, and a multi-line string is equal to this. I'm going to run this cell. Now I didn't get an error, but if I basically look at what the double quote string is, I see that it's error. I look at what the single quote string is, I see that it's also error. I should have used different words there. And I look at the multi-line string. If you're wondering how I'm auto-completing, that's because I'm just pressing tab after writing a couple of the words in a couple of letters, and this tells me that it's a multi-line string. Now here you'll notice that it didn't print it out the way I had inputted it. It printed it out with these slash ends in the middle, and that's what we'll get to next to. This slash is important in strings, and they're called escape characters. So let's imagine that you had to write the following string with single quotes. So Mrs. Apple's children. If I run this, yeah, we got an error because we started our string with a single quote, and then we ran into this single quote, which is the apostrophe s to show basically possession. Ran into that apostrophe s, and even if I were to fix this, Mrs. So if I were to say Mrs. Apples, oh, we ran into the apostrophe s, so our single quote is gone. But that doesn't matter, we can just add a single quote to the end, right? there's an error again, because sure, this single quote had its corresponding ending quote over here, but then this one didn't. So what do we do when we have such situations? So for example, if I have two of those, Mrs. Apple's children's books, right? So this one will correspond to this one, and then this one will correspond to this one, and we'll ref with schildren as the invalid syntax. So how do we fix this? How do we have the apostrophe s's and, for example, quote marks if you're writing in someone's code inside a string to later be manipulated? You use these slashes which showed over here. They're called escape characters. So if I were to have Mrs. Apple, now here I want to insert a single quote which Python will not interpret as the closing quote mark. So what I do is I add a backslash and my quote mark, and then I continue writing with Apple's children, then again backslash and my apostrophe and my s, children's books, and my final quote. And this quote that I added without the backslash, this is my closing quote mark to the original quote mark. So if I run this, there is no syntax error, and it does my string like I want it to, Mrs. Apple's children's books. So that's what the escape character does, and you can use it. And what the n over here means is new line. So if I want to insert a new line, so I'm gonna do Mrs. Apple's children's toys, and my closing quote. So here I got an error. Why? Because I tried to add new lines simply by pressing enter within my string definition, but that won't quite work because Python is scanning it this way to this way, but then it sees, oh no, what do I do over here? There is nothing telling me to go to the next line, and so it just throws an error. So there needs to be something to tell Python to go to the next line, and that's what /n is. Slash means to escape the following n. So normally inside a string, n just represents the letter n. I can get n, but if I were to escape the n, now it does not represent the letter n, it represents a special character n, which means new line. So I can have Mrs. Apple's, and then I can have a /n, so that'll represent my new line. Now I don't need to go into the new line. /n children's /n, I want a new line over there, books. And let me just check if my quote marks are complete. Yes, they are. So yeah, it shows up as /n. And right now, because I'm not printing this out, if I were to print this out, so let's say I copy this and I print it, then the /n's get translated into new lines as is required. Right now, if I just keep pressing enter just like that, it's basically returning what I typed in, but the print is actually interpreting what this /n means and what this \escape character means. And yeah, I get that using the \escape character is annoying, especially in terms of escaping apostrophes. So what you can do is that you can use a double quote to define your string, and then you can use single quotes inside. So Mrs. Apple's children's books, and then end with double quote. So if I were to print this, there is not gonna be an error, even though I have not escaped the inner apostrophes or quote marks. See? So yeah, that's another thing you can do. So that's the escape characters done. And now so another thing you can do with strings, trust me, this is going to be a long video. There's another thing you can do with strings is that you can slice them or index them. So every place in a string, so let's have a pretty long string, super califragilistic expialidocious. Excuse my spelling if I massacred it. Let's define this to be our working string. Actually, let's just call it string. Alright, I have defined a variable called string. In a string, each one of these characters is assigned a number, a position. So the first position is position 0, and then there's position 1, position 2, position 3, position 4. Okay, I mixed this up. Anyway, supercalifragilistic. So starting with position 0 and going all the way to the end. So if I want to access the 5th letter of this string, I want to see what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say string, then square brackets 5, and I see what it is. It's a C. Oh, okay, it's not the 5th letter because we're starting with a 0. So 5th index gives me the 6th letter because we're starting with a 0. If I want another useful function that I should mention over here is the len function. It's just short for length. So length of string is 34. There's 34 characters in here. So if I want to access the 34th character, it does not exist because again we're starting from 0. So the last character has the index 33 and not 34. So that's a very common error that people need to keep in mind. So for example, sometimes people want to obtain the last letter and they don't know how long the string is going to be. So what they do is, I'll just pass in the length of the string because that'll surely give me the last letter, and it gives an error because the length of the string -1 is what you're looking for. So string len string -1 because we're starting from a 0. That gives me the last S of the docious. This is pretty long to write, so the more syntax for the indexing bit is to get the last letter. So I'll just print string again. Strings, I want the last letter, so I'm going to say -1. Start from the back. Start from the back. That's what the minus is for, and go just one step. Give me that letter. That gives me an S. I can go 2 steps back, so -2. That'll give me a U. I said start going backwards by 2 steps, so it goes 1. It goes from here 1 and a 2. It lands at the U. Okay, so string. My bad. String 5 would give me the 6th letter because starting from a 0. String -1 would give me the last letter, and then comes so this was indexing. You can get the indexes from a string. What I'm showing you next is called slicing. So if I want a slice of the string, not just one character, I can do that by defining a lower bound where to start my slice from and an upper bound where to end my slice at. So let's pull up string again. So let's say I want a slice from the 5th character up to the 13th character. So what I'm going to do is string, give me a slice from the 5th character, which would be represented by index 4, and go up to but not including. So that's how Python interprets this. That's how Python syntax is programmed. It'll start from the lower bound is inclusive and the upper bound is exclusive. So it'll start from index 4, that's the 5th character, and if I want to go up to the 13th character, then I'm looking at index 15. No, wait, I'm looking at index 13, and that'll represent, yeah, index 13 represents the 14th character, but remember that 13 is not included. So this will stop at index 12, which represents the 13th character, and this returns me this slice from the string. What I can do anything with this slice. I can put this in a variable. So string, I want to go from 4 to 13, and now I can look at slice, and it's the exact same thing. I can also do the other thing that I did. I can go from so let's say I didn't know the length of this string, but I want a slice from the 5th character to the last character. So I can do string 5th character is index 4, and the last character we learned up here. To access the last character, we just do a -1. So the -1 is the last character, and oh yeah, -1 is the last character, but it's exclusive. So it's not going to include the last character. But if I want to include the last character, what I can do is just leave the second parameter blank. Then it'll go up to the last character. And let's say I want to start from this very start. What I can do is either 0 and go up to like the 12th index, exclusive. I can either do that, and then it'll start from index 0 because the starting point is inclusive, the ending point is exclusive, or I can leave the starting bound open. I can just leave it blank, and it'll give me the same thing. And now we've been looking at two parameters, the starting bound and the ending bound, but there's a third parameter called, so like if I use two of these colons, so I have this parameter to work with, I have this parameter, and I have this parameter to work with. The first parameter is of course your starting point. Well, let's say I want to start from index 3. The second one is your ending point, so I want to end at index 15, so that would mean I'm accessing index 16 because it's exclusive. And this the last parameter is the size of your steps. So by default the size of the steps is 1, so you're including every one, you're jumping by 1 to every next character. If I were to set it to 2, then it would jump by 2. It will skip every other letter between index 3 and index 15. And so what this allows us to do is to do something really cool. So I can basically reverse a string. What I can do is I want a slice of our supercalifragilistic. I want a slice of this starting from the start, ending at the end. So I'm leaving those two blank because that's how you signify that you want to start from the start, end at the end. And the size of my step, I can get this to be -1. So I want you to step this way. I want you to go backwards, that's what the minus is, and I want you to take steps of size 1, that's what the 1 is. What this is going to do is it's going to start from the start, end at the end, and take steps backwards. There is our supercalifragilistic backwards. So this is a really cool trick to quickly reverse strings. Usually other languages have a specifically defined function, and if they don't, you have to define your own function, which we'll learn to do how to do later. But Python comes with this really cool trick to define functions to reverse a string. So yeah, that was indexing and slicing. In the next video we'll continue with strings and look at how to manipulate strings, not by slicing. That's just one way. You can do so much more with strings, and you can even do authentication based on what the string looks like, what properties it has, like for example, is it capitalized, and stuff like that. So that has its own built-in Python methods that we'll look into in the next video. See you then.